From Africa to Spain to America. What is okra? The word kungumbo refers to the edible fruit in African hibiscus Abelmoschus allicentus, which Linnaeus had called Hibiscus licentius L., but which was later decided to include, along with aromatic Abelmosco, the Abelmoscus maucatus medic, in a new genre called Albumocus. The word quingumbo comes through the Portuguese "quingumbo" of the Mumbondo, a Bantu language from Angola, where this fruit was sometimes called "quinengombo", in which "ki" is a prefix that is sometimes used for a singular, so that the word has also spread without that prefix, taking the form "gombo". But in Cuba and other Caribbean countries, the suffixed form converted into Quingumbo, Chimbombo, Guingambo, and Quingongo is usually used. Okra in Iberia. Okra was introduced to Iberia during the Islamic period, likely between the 8th and 10th centuries. It came via North Africa and the eastern Mediterranean, where okra was already well established. In Arabic sources, it appears under names like Biamba, still in the modern Arabic word. Later Iberian Romance languages preserved traces of Arabic agricultural vocabulary, though okra itself did not become a staple everywhere. Okra thrived in southern Iberia, especially modern Andalusia, where warm summers, irrigation systems, intensive garden agriculture supported crops from warmer climates, and it was typically grown in kitchen gardens rather than large fields. Medieval Andalusi cookbooks, such as the 13th century Andalusi cookbook, suggested okra was used in stews with meat, olive oil, spices, and vinegar, combined with eggplant, onions, garlic, and herbs, and valued for its thickening properties, especially in brothy dishes. Okra in Iberia. Okra was a part of a broader Islamic green revolution in Iberia alongside eggplant, spinach, citrus, rice, and sugarcane. However, unlike olives or citrus, okra did not remain widespread in Christian Iberia after the Reconquista. It became more regionally limited and eventually marginal in Spanish cuisine. After the Middle Ages, okra largely disappeared from mainstream Iberian cooking. It survived longer in North Africa, the Middle East, and later spread to the Americas via the Atlantic world. Mujars. Mujar was originally the term used for Moors or Muslims of Al-Andalus who remained in Iberia after the Christian Reconquista, but were not initially forcibly converted to Christianity or exiled. The word "mujar" references several historical interpretations and cultural borrowings. It was a medieval Castilian borrowing of the Arabic word "mujan", meaning subjugated, tamed, or "amujar", meaning those who remained or stayed on, referring to Muslims who remained and submitted to the rule of the Christian kings. The term likely originated as a taunt, as the word was usually applied to domesticated animals such as poultry. The term mujar also can be translated from Arabic as the one permitted to remain, which refers to the Christians allowing Muslims to remain in Christian Iberia. Another term with the same meaning, al-Aldijan, people who stay on, was used by Muslim writers, notably al-Wanasirsi, in his work Kitab al-Midbar. Mujars in Iberia lived under a protected tributary status known as Dijan, which referred to al-Aldijan. This protected status suggested subjugation at the hands of Christian rulers, as the word Dane resembled Haywanat Dejani, meaning tame animals. Their protected status was enforced by the pharaohs or local charters which dictated Christian laws. Muslims of other regions outside of the Iberian Peninsula disapproved of the Mujar subjugated status and their willingness to live under subjugation. They were virtually indispensable to the nobles on whose lands they were settled, for they were the most skillful in agriculture and unwearied in labor. They carried these characteristics into every department of industry, science, and art. As physicians, they ranked with the Jews, and when in 1345 the prior of the Order of Santiago built the church of Nuestra Señora de Elis, we are told that the assembled Moorish masters and good Christian stone masons who erected the structure. They were equally skilled in marine architecture, and the Catalan power in the Mediterranean was largely due to their labors. The wonderful system of irrigation by which they converted Valencia into the Garden of Europe still exists, with its elaborate and equitable allotments of the waters. They introduced the culture of sugar, silk, cotton, rice, and many other valuable products, and not a spot of available ground was left untilled by their indefatigable industry. Mood jars. The chronological focus of this article is the 14th and 15th centuries, when, after a 13th century of Christian conquest and settlement and failed Mujar rebellion, a relatively stable socio-political order emerged. This socio-political order, in so far as it concerned Muslims and Christians, was based on the surrender agreements the Mujars had made with King James I, according to which they were to enjoy the freedom to practice Islam, communal and judicial autonomy, and the ability to own property and pursue most forms of livelihood. In the early 16th century, King Fernando II was still confirming these fundamental Mujar privileges and protections. The most salient feature of the new religiously plural society erected on the foundation of these treaties was that all Mujars had become vassals of either the king or the Christian rule lords. The Mujars' vassalic bonds to king or lord structured their relationship to Christian authority by determining to whom they paid rents and other taxes, and whose officials oversaw the administration of justice to them. By the mid-14th century, the majority of Mujars were seigneurial vassals. What is a vassal? Early 14th century, in the 200s, as a surname, a tenant who pledges fealty to a lord. From Old French vassal is a subject, subordinate, servant. 12th century, from medieval Latin vasalis, man-servant, domestic retainer, extended from vassus, servant. From Old Celtic wasso, young man, squire. Welsh youth servant, Breton servant, vassal, man, Irish foss servant, literally one who stands under, pi root uppo under. The reclassification and disenfranchisement of the indigenous Iberians. Once land was taken, they were no longer Mujars. Mujar was specifically meant a Muslim allowed to live under Christian rule while practicing Islam. So the moment one of these happens, the category ended. Forced conversion, expulsion, loss of legal recognition as a Muslim community. After that, they were reclassified, not simply dispossessed. How did they live after losing land? It depended heavily on where and why they lost it. Path 1. Peasant tenants and wage laborers, which was most common. When land was confiscated or lost through debt, many became sharecroppers, day laborers, tenant farmers, or often worked the same land that they once owned. They paid rent to nobles, monasteries, and the crown. Their living conditions were poor but stable. They lived in segregated villages or quarters and paid higher taxes than old Christians. Path 2. Urban marginal communities. Some dispossessed Moriscos moved to towns and worked as porters, builders, artisans, textile workers, living in poor districts, former Morerias, heavily policed and surveilled. They were legally Christian but socially suspect. Path 3. Forced relocation after rebellion. After the War of Alpujarras, 1568 to 1571,
Thousands were deported across Castile and broken up as communities and given small plots or no land at all. Forbidden from speaking Arabic, wearing traditional dress, and living together, many survived as landless rural laborers. Path 4. Slavery and extreme marginalization. In specific cases, they were captured during rebellions and accused of aiding pirates or Ottomans. Some were enslaved, sent to the galleys, and sold or ransomed. The reclassification and disenfranchisement of the indigenous Iberians. Cultural survival. They practiced Islam secretly, crypto-Islam, used Arabic privately, and maintained food customs discreetly. Social reality. Endogamy, marrying within Morisco communities, discrimination by old Christians, regular accusations of heresy. The final stage, 1609 to 1614, the expulsion. At expulsion, they were labeled Moriscos expelled from Spain. All of their remaining property was seized. Most ended up in North Africa, Ottoman lands, and southern France. Those who stayed illegally lived as undocumented laborers and assimilated families who hid ancestry. After losing their land, they were no longer mujares, usually labeled Moriscos. They lived as tenant farmers, laborers, marginal urban workers, regardless of conversion. They went from protected vassals to coerced converts to suspect minorities to dispossessed exiles.